Halloween night. It's the time of year when the veil between the living and the dead is said to grow thin, and things we normally can't explain start to creep out of the shadows. Tonight, I have 3 true stories of Halloween horror. Stories so disturbing, they'll make you rethink your plans for the next Halloween night. It was the fall of 1998, and Jake Anderson and his family had just moved into a large 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Chicago. The house, old and creaking with time, was located at the end of a cul-de-sac, isolated from the rest of the homes. It was surrounded by overgrown hedges, its dark windows reflecting only the sliver of moonlight that leaked through the clouds. Jake was a 16-year-old who didn't care much about moving. He had always been the adventurous type, often sneaking into abandoned places with his friends for fun. He had convinced himself that this new house would be the perfect setting for Halloween pranks and haunted house adventures. When Halloween night arrived, Jake invited his group of friends over. They were going to carve pumpkins, tell scary stories, and prank each other like they always did. But what started as a night of lighthearted fun quickly turned into a night of terror. They set up their gathering in the living room, the old floorboards creaking underfoot as they arranged the furniture. The house, which was supposed to be the perfect place for spooky thrills, gave off an unsettling atmosphere, but they brushed it off as just the quirks of an old home. The flickering of the lights wasn't helping though, and neither was the strange, off-putting scent that lingered in the air. "You feel that?" Mark, one of Jake's friends, whispered as he sat on the couch. He was trying to ignore the sensation of being watched, but couldn't quite shake it. The house had an odd energy about it. Even the air felt heavier than it should. Jake nodded, but didn't let it bother him. "It's an old house. It'll settle." The group laughed nervously, but it wasn't the settling that was bothering them. By 10 p.m., everyone had gathered in the basement to play poker. They had decided it would be the perfect spot to get some eerie, horror movie vibes going. It was colder in the basement than the rest of the house, and the furnace in the corner hummed loudly, almost ominously. The wooden beams in the ceiling seemed to groan as though the house itself was alive, echoing faint creaks throughout the room. "Why does it always feel like someone's watching us down here?" Sarah asked, her voice wavering slightly. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, unable to keep her eyes off the dark corner of the basement. "I don't know," Jake replied, glancing around, suddenly aware of how much the place unnerved him too. "It's probably just the weird sounds an old house makes. You know, settling and all." The group awkwardly went on with their game, but their nervous glances continued. Jake shuffled the deck, trying to focus, but his mind kept drifting. His eyes wandered to the furnace again, noticing how still it had become. The low hum that had been there earlier had faded into an eerie silence. He leaned back in his chair, the old wood creaking under him, his gaze drifting upward. His friends continued to joke around, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling. Something was off. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from upstairs, the sound of something heavy crashing to the floor. Everyone froze, their faces going pale as the sound reverberated through the basement. "What the hell was that?" Mark whispered, his eyes wide with panic. Jake stood up, his heart racing. He looked toward the stairs. "It's nothing. It's just the house settling, right?" But even as he said it, doubt crept into his voice. Another loud crash, followed by what sounded like something, or someone, shuffling across the floor upstairs. The tension in the room was palpable, and the silence that followed seemed to carry a heavy weight. "I'm going to check it out," Jake said, his voice hoarse, though his legs felt heavy, like lead. He hesitated, but his curiosity got the better of him. The others seemed frozen, not daring to move. "Jake, don't." Sarah's voice was filled with panic, but her warning came too late. Jake started to ascend the creaky wooden stairs, his breath coming in shallow gasps. As he reached the top, the air grew noticeably colder. The faint smell from earlier had returned, stronger now, almost metallic. He glanced at the hallway ahead, but before he could take another step, a shadow darted across the far wall. He froze, eyes wide. "What the hell?" "Jake, stop!" Mark's voice shouted from the bottom of the stairs. But it was too late. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate. Jake's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure if he should call out or if he should run. Instead, he took a step forward, and then, from around the corner, emerged a figure. Tall, unnaturally tall, wearing a long, tattered coat. The figure's face was obscured by a strange, dark mask, stitched together for what appeared to be old fabric. It stood motionless, staring at Jake with empty eyes. Jake's breath caught in his throat. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, trying to sound braver than he felt. But the figure didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head, as though studying Jake with an almost inhuman curiosity. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, with a sudden movement, the figure took a step forward. Jake's heart thudded in his chest, his body frozen with fear. What do you want?" The figure stepped closer, so close that Jake could feel the cold emanating from its body. He turned and tried to run back toward the stairs, but the figure was faster. It grabbed his wrist with an inhuman strength, its cold fingers tightening around him. Jake gasped, struggling to free himself, but the grip didn't loosen. It was then that the growl came, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the floor beneath him. It wasn't a man. It wasn't even a creature. It was something else. "Jake!" Mark shouted from below. "Get out of there!" But the figure's grip didn't loosen. Rachel's heart raced as she turned on her heel, feeling the cold air of the woods bite at her skin. The sound of her breathing filled her ears, loud and frantic, drowned only by the crashing of her friends' footsteps as they ran with her. But even as they sprinted through the dense forest, Rachel couldn't shake the sensation of being pursued, like a predator was lurking just out of sight. The figure in the mask hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, but something about the way it stood, motionless, made Rachel feel like she was being trapped in a game she didn't want to play. They rounded a bend in the trail, but Rachel's eyes shot back, searching desperately for any sign of the figure. The woods had grown unervingly quiet, the usual rustle of leaves and wildlife replaced by a dense silence, the kind that makes you feel like you're being watched from every angle. She stopped in her tracks, panic surging in her chest. "Guys, did you see that?" She gasped, her voice strained. Mark, who had been a few steps behind her, barely kept up. His face was pale, eyes wide in terror. I don't know. It was just there like a shadow." But Rachel wasn't listening. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she glanced around, still trying to spot the figure that had never followed them. The terrifying thought clawed at her. What if it was already behind them? A twig snapped loudly underfoot, and Rachel spun around. There was no figure, no masked stranger in sight. She exhaled in relief. Maybe it was just her imagination. Maybe they were just spooked by a random encounter. Still, the uneasy feeling lingered, like a heavy weight on her chest. "We need to get out of here," Rachel said, trying to force her trembling voice to sound authoritative. "Now!" Her friends nodded, fear evident in their expressions. But they didn't move. No one spoke. It was as if the woods themselves had stolen their words, leaving only silence in its wake. Rachel felt the panic rise again. She grabbed Sarah's arm, trying to urge her forward, but before she could say anything, a cold gust of wind blew through the trees, howling and carrying a strange, whispering sound that seemed to come from nowhere. The rustling leaves became sharp and disorienting. Rachel's heart skipped a beat as she heard it. Laughter. It was soft at first, a low, unsettling chuckle that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Then it grew louder. The laughter was followed by the distinct sound of footsteps, quick, uneven, yet deliberate, approaching from behind them. No, Rachel murmured, her voice faltering. They turned, and there he was. The masked figure, standing right at the edge of the path. This time, he didn't stay still. He was walking toward them, slow, deliberate, as though each step was part of a ritual. His face, hidden behind that grotesque stitched mask, was frozen in that same eerie, unblinking stare. "Run!" Rachel screamed, her voice raw with fear. But before they could react, the figure lunged toward them with incredible speed, grabbing Mark by the arm with a force so strong that it sent him to the ground. Mark yelped, but the figure didn't speak. He just pulled Mark to his feet, dragging him back toward the trees. The others were too stunned to do anything but watch in horror. Rachel's legs trembled as she backed away. Her eyes were fixed on Mark, now being dragged, helpless by the masked figure. "No," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Let him go," but the figure didn't respond. His grip tightened, and Mark's screams grew fainter as they vanished deeper into the woods. Then, everything went quiet again. The figure, Mark, and the sounds of their struggle had disappeared. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The silence was overwhelming, suffocating. Then, Sarah gasped. "Where did he go? What just happened?" Rachel's eyes were wild, her breath coming in rapid bursts. "I don't know. We need to find him. We have to get Mark." They turned to run, but stopped when they saw something that made their blood run cold. The figure was standing in the woods again, but this time, he was facing them. He stood there motionless, his head tilted slightly to the side. "Run!" Rachel yelled, turning to her friends. Now, before it's too late, they ran, not knowing where they were going, just knowing they had to get away. But the forest seemed to stretch on forever. The path they had once been so familiar with now felt like a labyrinth of darkness, twisting around them. The last thing Rachel saw before the woods swallowed them up was the faint silhouette of the masked figure, standing in the distance, watching. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight. A cold drizzle coated the cracked sidewalks of Ashfield, a small mill town surrounded by endless evergreens. Porch lights flickered weakly through the fog as jack-o'-lanterns sat on doorsteps, their candles long since burned out. Inside a corner diner, the fluorescent bulbs hummed and buzzed. Sheriff Dale Henson sat alone in a booth, a half-empty cup of coffee cooling between his hands. He stared through the fog-covered window at the empty Main Street. Every Halloween, the town felt different, as if something old and heavy hovered above it. Across from him, Deputy Ellen Grant flipped through a thin case file, her fingers trembling slightly. Ellen said, quietly, "You really think it's the same guy, Sheriff?" Henson replied, leans back, rubbing his eyes, "For Halloweens. 4 women, all within 10 miles. You tell me." He didn't need to say more. The pattern was there, even if no one wanted to admit it. Melissa Carter was 26, a librarian with a soft voice and a habit of humming when she shelved books. On October 28th, she stayed late at the Ashfield Public Library to finish decorating the children's section. The janitor, Mr. Cole, remembered seeing her smile and wave as she left around 9:45 p.m. She never made it home. When her body was found 2 days later, it was the kind of discovery that steals the breath from a town. Her car sat parked neatly beside a cornfield, keys still in the ignition. A small carved pumpkin rested on the hood, its mouth twisted into a jagged grin. Inside the pumpkin, a single candle burned even after the morning dew had fallen. Sheriff Henson stood beside the car, hat low, rain dripping from a brim. The morning fog clung to the air like gauze. Melissa lay a few yards away, her body posed as though she were still sleeping. Her eyes were closed, her hands folded neatly over her chest, and a piece of orange ribbon tied around her wrist. Henson said, softly, "Who does something like this?" Ellen replied, "Someone who wants to be remembered." Those words would haunt him for decades. Every Halloween after that, another victim appeared. Always a woman. Always a small carved pumpkin nearby. Always the same orange ribbon. The papers called him the Pumpkin Man, but to the people of Ashfield, he became something else, a curse. By 1980, parents kept their kids indoors after sunset. Trick-or-treating died quietly. Porch lights stayed off. Windows were nailed shut. Even the high school bonfires were banned. Still, the killings never stopped. And then, as suddenly as they'd started, they did. 1984 passed without incident. The following year, Halloween came and went in silence. People dared to believe it was over. Until 1985, that Edward Graham was 43 when the police finally arrested him. A drifter who'd been in and out of Ashfield for years, doing odd jobs and living out a rusted camper near the quarry. His record showed assaults, break-ins, petty theft, but nothing close to murder. When they brought him in, he didn't resist. He just smiled, Detective Marla Thorne sat across from him in the small gray interrogation room. The single bulb overhead buzzed, casting their shadows across the wall. Edward leaned back, his wrists cuffed, a faint grin curling his chapped lips. His eyes were pale, too pale, and there was a slow amusement in them, like he was watching a play only he understood. Thorne said, "You know why you're here, Edward." Graham added, "Snickers, Halloween's coming." "Seems fitting." Thorne chipped in, "Melissa Carter, Janet Rowe, Lisa Henderson. You left pumpkins at every scene." Graham said, "Tilt head, you ever carve one and think, maybe it's watching you? Like you gave it a face, so it could judge you?" Thorne said nothing. The tape recorder whirred softly. Graham added, "I didn't pick them. They picked me. Halloween does that. It opens the door for what wants to come through. I just held it open." He smiled wider, revealing cracked, yellow teeth. The room seemed to grow colder. Edward Graham's confession was less of a statement and more of a performance. Half truth, half fever dream. He claimed that each year on Halloween night, the door opened and demanded a sacrifice to keep the town safe from something worse. When asked what that was, he just whispered, "It lives in the corn." Detective Thorne pressed him for details, but he would only hum an eerie, childish tune. When she asked where the bodies were buried, he tapped the table rhythmically. Tap, 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 pause, tap. They searched the cornfields near the quarry. They found 4 more bodies. Halloween 1985 began with light rain. Kids trick-or-treated again for the first time in years. The air smelled of wet leaves and sugar. That night, around 11:30 p.m., a young couple driving home along Old Mill Road saw something in their headlights. A figure standing in the middle of the road. They slowed down. The man wore a dark raincoat. In his hand, a small pumpkin, candle flickering inside. When the driver honked, the figure didn't move. Then, slowly, it turned its head toward them. The woman screamed. The car swerved. By the time the driver looked back, the road was empty. The next morning, another body was found near the quarry. A woman named Claire Holt. Same ribbon, same carved pumpkin, same eerie pose. Edward Graham was arrested the next day. He'd been seen wandering near the quarry, hands stained with something dark. When they asked him why he did it, he laughed softly because the door was open again, and he didn't close it. Edward Graham died in prison 2 years later, found hanging in his cell with a length of orange ribbon tied neatly around his neck. The case was closed, or so they thought. In 1995, 10 years to the day after Graham's arrest, a pumpkin appeared on the steps of the Ashfield Police Department. Its mouth was carved into a jagged smile. Inside, a single burning candle. Beside it lay a note. The door was never yours to close. The handwriting didn't match Graham's that a true crime podcaster named Lena Morrison drove to Ashfield with a single microphone and too much curiosity. Her podcast Whisper Files specialized in unsolved small-town mysteries, and the Pumpkin Man legend was perfect bait. She parked outside the abandoned Ashfield Library, the same building Melissa Carter once worked in. The windows were boarded, but faint graffiti spelled "Don't Open" on Halloween. Lena adjusted her recorder, her breath visible in the October air. It's October 30th. I'm standing outside what locals still call the Haunted Library of Ashfield. Tomorrow marks the 50th anniversary of the first Pumpkin Man murder. People here still won't carve jack-o'-lanterns, still won't say his name after midnight. She paused, glancing around. A curtain in one of the nearby houses shifted. Inside her car later that night, she played back the audio. Between her words, beneath the hiss of the wind, another sound came through, a faint, rhythmic tapping. Tap, 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 pause, tap. The same pattern from Edward Graham's confession tapes. The next morning, Lena followed an old rumor that a wooden shack still stood near the quarry, the so-called door in the corn. Locals said Graham used to carve pumpkins there, leaving them along the fence line like sentries. She hiked in, recorder still running. The path was overgrown, the corn dry and brittle, whispering in the wind. The sky was a dull gray, the kind that presses down on you. Halfway there, her recorder picked up something, a low hum, almost like a voice under the static. Voice, whisper, barely audible turn back. Lena froze. She looked around, heart hammering. Nothing but corn. She forced a laugh, trying to calm herself. Okay, that's weird. When she finally reached the shack, she found it collapsed from rot. But sitting in front of it, perfectly centered, was a fresh pumpkin. The candle inside was still warm. And carved into the wood above the door were words that hadn't been there in 1985. New, jagged letters cut deep into the planks. He never left. The wind picked up, carrying a familiar smell, wet earth and iron. Her recorder hissed, then went silent. The episode was never uploaded. Lena Morrison was never seen again. Some say you can still hear that tapping sound if you stand by the quarry on Halloween night. Others swear they've seen a faint light moving through the corn, a lantern made from a carved pumpkin, swinging just above the ground. Maybe Edward Graham was a madman who used the holiday as his excuse. Or maybe Ashfield was never cursed by a person at all. Maybe it was the town itself that wanted the door left open. If you made it to the end, you're one of the brave ones. Comment, "I survived Halloween night," if you watched all 3 stories, and subscribe for more real-life nightmares every week. Stay scared. Stay curious.